All right, in the previous video, we already checked out some pieces of empirical evidence. It looks like that these pieces of evidence are in line with our hypothesis. Okay? The hypothesis is the more an economy trades with the rest of the world, the higher its income, okay? Or the more advanced its economy. And when we dig deeper, we find that how much economy trades with the rest of the world actually depends upon the geographic location. Okay? If the country like Japan and Asian tigers have plenty of access to sea or marine shipment, then they are at the better position to trade with other economies. So they tend to have open mind. Okay, they are more curious or eager to learn, the technologies, and culture, and what's going on in general, outside of their own economies. And to help you guys better understand this, or to further convince you about this idea, then we also discussed the landlocked economies, okay, especially those ones in Asia. Okay, you would find that they tend to be lower income, relatively speaking. Okay, and we said that this is probably because these economies, especially in the old days, okay, they tend to be not just landlocked but also mind locked. Okay, in other words, if they don't trade with the rest of the world, then decades by decades, century by century, okay, they lost their interest in outside the world. Okay, they don't care about what's going on in Great Britain or what's going on in United States. Okay, they just live in their own country, their own world. Okay, so that might be another reason we could understand. There still have a number of countries in Asia. They are kind of falling behind, okay, in terms of economic development. Now, I would guess some of you are still remain skeptical. Okay, you're still saying that well, we're still looking at just a few countries or a number of countries like these landlocked ones or Asian tigers, but there are more than 200 economies on our planet, right? Is that really true? When we kind of zoom out and take a wider picture and look at global wide, if that's still the case. Okay, if we still have that relationship across many other countries. Okay, all right. So let me give it another try. All right, and as I said, I have a plenty of empirical evidence here, ready to share with you guys. Now this one we look at the global wide, okay, worldwide. We look at the population density specifically. Okay, so here when you look at these light yellow parts, okay, you would find that the population density is less than 1, I believe, per acre. I tend to say that, or per like a squared kilometers. Okay, I think it might be square kilometers because this is worldwide, so they're using the metrics system. Okay, and when we go darker, to look at the orange ones, the brown ones, and dark brown ones, there would be like over 5,000 people per squared kilometers. Okay. Now, again, I strongly encourage you to pause the video and just take a look at this map, okay, and see if you can find any pattern here, okay, any regularity about the distribution of population. In other words, in which areas across the world tend to have more people living over there. All right, pause the video and think about it. Now let's take a look at this. I hope you already find that in general, okay, of course there are many outliers, but in general we find the coastal areas, you can find the darker color, in other words more population, like these areas in India, in China, Japan, right, and Indonesia, Malaysia, these areas. And Europe, you find the same thing. Africa is probably the most apparent ones. Okay, these coastal areas, again, we tend to see more people living there. Okay, and North America, the same thing. Mexico, and again, Colombia, Chile, Peru, here in South America. Okay, Brazil. And so in general, we find that more people live in the coastal area. Now, you probably want to say, look at India here, China, they also have a lot of people living in the inland area. Okay, in other words, they don't have the coastline or seaports. So, also in Europe. Okay. Now, let's go back and rethink about the hypothesis itself. We said it's about trade, right? What matters is about trade. And the trade engagement depends upon the access to marine shipment, right? In other words, it depends upon access to water, okay? Because the water is really, the key factor here, okay? And so the water access, the ocean is just part of it, but we also have a lot of rivers, okay, on the land. So that might be another important factor we missed in our previous discussion. Okay? Now here I get more numbers to share with you. If we look at the world landmass, okay, you would find that 17.4% of the world landmass is located 60 miles of an ocean or a river that is navigable. Okay? We use 60 miles because it gives, people would spread out, along the coast area or the river bank, right? Remember, 17.4% of our landmass. However, there are nearly half of the world's population lived on this land, okay? And more than 2/3 of the world's GDP or output produced on it. The GDP per capita in the areas that's within 60 miles of the sea is on average twice as high as the GDP per capita in the areas further inland. Again, this is worldwide. Okay, the evidence is actually pretty strong. Okay, telling us the access to water. Or the geographical advantage of being engaged in trade. Again, it may be the international trade, it may be the trade within a country, right? And these are quite important in terms of economic development. Okay, this is something we find in Asia, but not in Africa. Okay, so that could be used, as an explanation for Africa falling behind relatively. All right. Okay. Now I think here we probably could put everything together and wrap up our discussion about the geographical location. Okay. And as we this map you should be very familiar with. Okay. So as we said, here putting together the access to sea or river, okay, and sea is pretty important actually. Okay? And if you at this point are still not convinced, let me give the last try. Okay, I actually have, as I said, many other empirical evidences in my toolkit, okay, in my backpack. But I think because of the time limit, I just want to share with you one more. Okay, if we compare the two continents, okay, Europe especially the Western Europe and Africa. We look at two things. The first one is land area. If Europe is 1, then Africa is 8. In other words, Africa is 8 times as large as Europe, okay, in terms of land mass. The second thing we compare is the coastline, okay? You actually find the European's coastline is 50% longer than African coastline. Now, this might be a little counterintuitive because Africa is so big, but remember, because in Europe there are a lot of peninsulas, islands, so their coastlines are actually much longer than Africans. Okay? Again, use that to think about their income level. Okay, especially here you can see a lot of dark red, blue. European countries that are rich, developed, but in Africa, again, you see a lot of them, especially in the sub-Saharan Africa. They're super poor countries. Their GDP per capita is less than $2 per day. Okay, $2 per day. And you also find that many of them are actually landlocked, as we said before. Okay, so again, access to sea is one thing, but we also find that for example, some of these Southeast Asian economies or some of these African economies are also island economies, like Madagascar here. Okay, or some of the Caribbean economies are also island ones surrounded by water, but they are not as rich as Japan or Asian tigers. So what's wrong with them? Okay, now here we're gonna see the second factor, which is also important. They got to be next to the major center of economic activities. So again, when we look at the Great Britain, it's very close to Europe, right? And Japan is very close to Asia continent, the main continent, especially China. Okay, why economy leads to be close to the major continent or the economic center? Because again, that's how these countries can be taken as a stepping stone, for the merchants, okay, or for the foreign merchants when they want to open the doors for the major market. Okay? As we said before, Great Britain actually benefit a lot from the transatlantic trade, okay, between North America and Europe. Japan, if you remember, these foreigners, including Dutch, British, Americans, they went to Japan for multiple reasons. Okay, and but one of the reasons is actually, their ultimate goal is to open China store, but because back then China was relatively strong. Okay, so they wanna take the Japan as a stepping stone. Okay, so they make a stop here in trying to be more familiar with the Asian culture and markets, and then eventually they still want to go to China. So again, island economy is at a better position, not just because they're easy access to marine transportation, but also they need to be closer to the major economic powerhouse. Okay. All right, so here, if we put together, we're going to see, is this a good news or bad news for developing countries? Okay, in Asia, in Africa, in South America. Now, it sounds like, this is the statement that geography is destiny. Okay, in other words, how rich these economies are depends upon their geographic location. Okay, and in this case, you don't have to worry about the reverse causation. Okay? In other words, when we build a relationship between the geography and the economic development, if there's any relationship, then the relationship must go from geographic location to economic prosperity. Okay? Because it's ridiculous to say that when two countries are getting richer, then they geographically becomes closer, right? That doesn't make sense at all. Okay, So again, we don't have to worry about the reverse causation here. All right, and so that's